Hi, welcome to my channel. In this video, I will not give any direct quotes because there's no need to. Now, I'm talking about conversation. Here's the problem with the art of conversation. There's not a lot that is spoken of it in rhetorical schools and philosophy in the ancient world or anything like that. There are some sources. Cicero, for example, talks about the art of conversation as being something the Socratics mastered. Uh, Guazzo, he was this Italian guy from the, I think, 17th century. He wrote The Art of Conversation. It was not particularly an interesting book. Um, Xenophon and Plato. Now, if we look at what uh, Cicero says, Socrates was a master conversationalist, and the Socratics were too. They wrote about Socrates. And you kind of can see where Socrates was a master conversationalist within all his dialogues. But more on that in a second. I would like this to be more of a practical video. This is going to be a little bit off topic from the channel for the most part. Um, in the topics, Aristotle talks about the art of reasoning as important for several reasons. One of them was casual conversation. Um, he uses another term. I'm not going to use it in the specific translations that I have. That means something else in this day and age, and so I'm not going to talk about it that way. But um, the whole entire idea is when you're using the dialectic, you could use it for serious philosophical use. You could use it for investigating science. You can use it for casual discussion and so on. Um, the art of reasoning itself is useful very much for everything that you can think of. But you start from these probable principles, credible principles. Aristotle talks about apagoge. Now, what is this? It's abductive reasoning. What happens in abductive reasoning is you look for the credible principles, the premises that are agreeable to the many, the all, or to the most illustrious. Now, this is important because when you're dealing with conversation, you're dealing with several different opinions. You have this guy over there, he's a Marxist, so he's going to believe certain things that are relevant to Marxism, but there's always going to be some element of common ground we can agree on. Even if I am not a Marxist, of course I'm not a Marxist, I'm neo-Aristotelian. You could even accuse me of Hegelianism or pragmatism if you were to get to know some of my ideas. But, I'm not a Marxist, but there are some things that we could agree on. And that's called endoxa. In endoxa, it's a reputable opinion. And I have already defined what it was, or what it is. It is something that is agreeable to the many, to the majority, to the most, and so on. Aristotle in Eudaimonia Ethics uses endoxa to define what people would consider to be happiness. Now, he, of course, put parameters. They could not be criminals, they could not be crazy people, uh, to meet with the parameters of his investigation into ethics. But he still did that, and he came up with the theories, questioning, okay, well, which is the best definition of happiness, and so on, and how it all connected, and so on and so on and so on. He talks about the virtues, and then we got the Aristotelian model of ethics, which a lot of people subscribe to. Some people don't, but It's such a beautiful and brilliant work. And yet, it's also kind of off topic. So, moving on from that, you want to not only have that common opinion or the reputable opinion, which you investigate dialectically and so on, looking at what is more likely than the others. Um, More on that in a different video. But next, I want to go over some rhetorical tricks in Phaedrus and in other dialogues of Plato, especially, but you also see it some in Xenophonic dialogues. Socrates is often portrayed making jokes about his interlocutors. Such jokes, of course, you could look at in Phaedrus that he is happy to basically flirt with Phaedrus. He's like just talking about how much he's tossing and turning because of the erotic love oration that Phaedrus is doing and how wonderful it is and how supportive he's being and so on. Now, of course, I wouldn't say flirt with your opponent. That's depending on the situation. But here's why jesting always is a good thing. Aristotle, in the Rhetoric, towards the end, he talks about jesting as a valuable tool. You don't jest in a way that is not gentlemanly. What does that mean? It means you're not going to jest in a way to entertain others, but to entertain yourself. Now, that might sound weird to a modern audience because why tell a joke if it's not going to be perceived as funny? Here's the reason why: because they're trying to lighten the mood. Let's say you take your family members, the Democrat, the Republican. They are fighting out. They are pissed off. They want to say stuff that they would regret. Well, what if one of them were to tell a joke which would change their mindset? They would say whatever, a dad joke, a clever joke, whatever, and then they start to laugh a little bit. Now, it may or may not be received by the other person, but that doesn't matter. Because when you do this, you're setting the atmosphere in your conversation. And generally speaking, when you watch what happens when two people are doing this heated discussion, one person gets really angry, yells, one person gets passionate and yells, the other person doesn't like that, so they yell back. The other person doesn't. That person doesn't like that either, so they yell back. Then they keep going at it. Hopefully, not to throw hands, but that happens sometimes with people, and that could have been avoided if you break this cycle. And how do you break this cycle? Jesting. But you don't want to jest in a way that would bring bad attention to yourself. So you don't jest in ways that would certainly make other people laugh because they might be laughing at you or whatever. Of course, we can take a warning that you should not make fun of people like Cicero did because, of course, that's not going to help keep a conversation down. It's going to basically turn you into the bully. Okay, so another tactic used by Socrates a lot is asking questions. That is part of dialectic. You're looking for the topics. So as you're asking the questions, you're kind of framing it to where the discussion can start occurring, where you can see areas to start talking from. Whether you're doing a rhetoric, you're looking for the possible means of persuasion. the rhetorical topics, the invention, or you're doing dialectics, so you're looking for the topics themselves. You are looking at genus, uh, probability, uh, several different sorts of things which would give you the chance to set up a case for something or to see what the other is finding to be probable. Because, like, when you are discussing, it's kind of important not only to set your case, but let's be honest, not everyone has the same training. And one of your duties as someone who is in a conversation, whether you're debating and doing dialectic or conversation itself, casual conversation, your duty is to make sure that you understand what the other person is saying. So it's advisable not to go straight to the reductio ad absurdum. It's advisable to even help someone construct their argument in a way in which you could understand it or someone else could understand it. Um, Aristotle talks about this a little bit in Topics. Um, but again, I'm not citing sources right now. I'm just talking about conversation in general for my viewers. Another strategy, and this is the last one because we are already above 11 minutes. The next strategy I want to talk about is to basically keep an open mind. Now, open-mindedness does not mean to accept something that someone says is right, only that could be potentially right. So, open-mindedness doesn't mean throw away your thinking for yourself. It means to listen. Um, it means to hear the other person out and then to respond to it. Now, Michel de Montaigne, he would talk about the importance of the intellectual spar. I talked about that already in one of my videos. So the intellectual spar, uh, the ability to respond and deal with contrary opinions, that is something that can be lost if you do not really know how to handle conversation, if you do not know how to do dialectic, logic, and so on. A lot of people in this day and age tend to be in error by being a little bit too aggressive, and this might scare people away from certain topics. So, what I would recommend off the cuff, not from necessarily from any sources, would be not only to be open-minded, but to lead with gentleness. Remember, logic and love are the two L's. Logic to understand things, to break things down, to lead with reason. Love to be charitable, to be kind to your opponent, realizing that they are not your opponent necessarily, but a comrade. Bjordan actually talks about a lot of this in Reason as a Commander, citing Aristotle. Valla talks about your conversation partners, the person you're disputing with, as being a comrade in arms looking for truth. And that's what you want to view other people as. So, let's say you're a Christian and there's an atheist, or you're a Christian, there's a Muslim, you're an atheist and there's a Christian, or whatever. The other person is not your enemy. Your enemy is anything that would get you away from looking for truth. So you could be your own enemy. A lot of people can actually are their own enemies. Or they could be your enemy by not responding properly in a conversation, because it takes two people. Responding properly, of course, is with respect, with looking at the facts, with being willing to reason with each other. So, and of course, falsehood, anything that's false is an enemy. So you bring each other towards truth. That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching.